Hi, I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the RPM Podcast.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us for our post-race discussion of all the action at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. We saw a classic strategy battle on Sunday, and unfortunately Verstappen had to settle for second best as Lewis Hamilton converted pole number 100 into a win. I'm also, as always, joined by Shane to pour over what we saw on track and go over all the big talking points. So let's get cracking.
So we'll start off with practice and qualifying. I've not got too much to say about practice, apart from we've got a slightly alteration. We've got a slight alteration to the circuit this year. At turn 10, instead of it being a really heavy braking zone with a sharp left-hander where there's overtaking opportunities, we've slightly widened it. And it's a corner, it's a 180-degree corner, but over, 30, 40 metres and comes back on just before turn 11. With the idea to increase overtaking or making the cars follow a little bit more closer into Sector 3. Maybe we should talk about this now, actually, this turn, because it's quite evident how it was going to be throughout practice and qualifying, how much of an impact it was going to have during the race. What did you think? I
don't think it's 180 degree. I don't think it'd be a 180 degree corner because that would make it like a. I mean, they'd be going back around on themselves.
True. Yeah,
I assume you misspoke. Yeah. So they've changed the wrong part of the track. I don't understand why they've changed it. They've decided to change turn 9, even though there wasn't really anything particularly wrong with it. I don't think. Whereas really, I think people are screaming out for that chicane to be removed and for them to use the old bit of the track, which also they said they couldn't use. They weren't allowed to use it during qualifying or indeed any part of the Grand Prix weekend, which also seemed a bit strange. When you end up in qualifying, people are going to get in each other's way. You think they'd say it's all right to use that road to let people go by. No, they couldn't use it. I cannot understand what the justification is for continuing to use that chicane. But bring it to your actual question, which is, what do I think about this change to the track? It was pretty inoffensive. It didn't really seem to change the racing that much. It was still a clear overtaking opportunity at the end of a DRS zone. But ultimately, I think the change seemed pretty negligible to me.
Yeah, it didn't have much impact on qualifying or the racing. Obviously, qualifying was slightly altered this year because we've got a different track, so no new lap records were set. Obviously, we've got slower cars this year as well, but it was always going to be slower than last year because of the track being a little bit longer. But moving on to qualifying itself, what did you think? We had the usual top 5, didn't we, really?
Yeah, there weren't any massive surprises this time. Lewis Hamilton obviously made it pole number 100, an absolutely incredible achievement with his 1:16.741. Very, very close between him and Verstappen once again. It really was an excellent shootout. Big shout out to my man Esteban Ocon putting in a fantastic P5. He did really, really well. When you consider that Fernando Alonso could only mention P10, it really was a great lap from him. Also encouraging to see what are not officially the second drivers, but what some people might see as the second drivers for their respective teams. Carlos Sainz and Daniel Ricciardo outdoing both of their teammates. Leclerc did beat Sainz, but both of them did very well. They did much better in qualifying. But Daniel Ricciardo managed to outperform Lando Norris. But wasn't a huge shake-up. I think the only main surprise was Sergio Perez made a bit of a rookie error at the crucial moment in Q3 and ended up starting P8 as a result. Red Bull are going to want more from him going forward. Although apparently Sergio looked quite pale after qualifying and said he was feeling a bit dizzy and under the weather, like he was a bit ill on the day, apparently.
Yeah, I heard the same, but that was the first I heard of it throughout the whole weekend. And sometimes we get to hear if the drivers are feeling unwell leading up to the week, especially with a double header as well. But that wasn't the case. I want to bring one thing to your attention, and I'm really keen to see your viewpoints on this.
Okay.
Lando Norris in Q1 was on a hot lap, and we've all talked about that terrible chicane where there was 3 or 4 cars just all basically static. They're just stationary, waiting for these cars to go through. Nikita Mazepin got caught up in all this and pulled out of this chain of cars and just went for it, which I And eventually he ended up getting a penalty point and dropped 3 places in qualifying. So he went from 20th to 20th. For him, that's no big deal, but he impeded Lando Norris's lap. I personally, looking back on this, I watched qualifying after I saw the results, didn't think it was that big of a deal. I think there was 4 or 5 cars in the space of the last 2 corners. Any one of them could have pulled out. He probably couldn't see behind him because there was a right angle, the 90-degree turn just before that penultimate corner, and he just tried to get out of the way of everyone. And I just feel like it was a bit harsh. It was a bit harsh in my opinion.
I agree. I thought it was a bit much. He didn't really lose out with his position because obviously he was going to start last anyway. But it's another penalty point on his license that I'm sure he could do without. Yeah. Even Lando Norris defended him at the stewards' briefing. They all said that they saw that it was pretty difficult because he had been passed by Raikkonen and someone else. I don't remember who.
Yeah.
But they basically got past him. That put him in a position where he couldn't really do a whole lot about it.
He had nowhere to go.
If he did impede Norris's lap, then he didn't really do it in a malicious way. He didn't really do it because there was some kind of miscommunication. He did it because the only other option was for him to drive off the track. So I thought that was a little bit harsh, and I kind of want to use this opportunity, because I get it out the way to begin with, that we had a little conversation before we started recording about, I think both of us are getting a little bit bored of the people on the broadcast laying into Mazepin every opportunity they get. Last weekend, a bunch of people decided to do a blackout on social media to show the sort of need for less bullying and, less abusive behavior on social media. And I agree, it is incredible some of the stuff people have to put up with. But that includes Mazepin, surely. We can't say that we want to have a more compassionate, more encouraging, more positive environment and then treat the guy like this for what, for anyone else, would be pretty minor infractions. I mean, the guy, Mazepin himself, joined the blackout and was essentially bullied for it, because it wasn't good enough in the eyes of some people. I'm getting bored of it. It's really, really boring. Like, the guy's in the worst car on the grid, and as you said, and perhaps you should expand on, he is showing signs of improvement.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're talking about Mazepin and this is an F1 podcast. We don't talk about anything outside of F1, and obviously lots happened with multiple drivers over the last 10, 20 years outside of Formula 1, but we're here to talk about on-track action with the new rookies coming into the season. And I just feel like every time during that Spanish Grand Prix, Mazepin got overtaken or lapped, there was a comment about how he maybe held up Perez or Max last week, or he got in the way a couple of weeks ago, or, this is going to be difficult because Mazepin's the next car to be lapped and he always gets in the way. Well, actually, I think, I didn't see many of the lapped overtakes, but there was no complaints I heard over the radio, apart from that Toto one. But just that aside,
everyone complains about blue flags anyway.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter who
absolutely.
It is. Everyone complains about blue flags.
Yeah, going back to what I wanted to expand on, the first race of the season in Bahrain, spun a handful of times, probably more so than any of the other rookies have done in the last couple of years. But he's a brand new driver in a brand new car.
Latifi did the same thing at the start of last year. And
absolutely,
we did criticise him for it then, but
we
massively
heavily criticised him. What was the second race of the year? I can't remember. They've all gone by so fast. We
went to Imola.
Yeah, we went to Imola, and he spun out a couple of times there in qualifying and once in the race, but it showed the Schumacher. He knocked off his front wing. And then Portugal happened last week, and he didn't. He finished the whole race, but did have that little situation with being lapped. But again, sometimes it's hard to be lapped, especially depending on the circuit.
The team have to take some responsibility for that as well.
Yes, and I'm glad you said this, because you can hear the radio comms between Schumacher and his engineer and Mazepin and his engineer. And Schumacher is receiving all this love and support and encouragement, especially when he spun, knocked his front wing off. It was like, don't worry, we can box, we can put the car back together. It's not a problem, you're learning. And Mazepin does something, and it's not by all means horrible, but it's very short and to the point. And I don't see that as a bad thing, but there's just a direct comparison between, the overall team and their two engineers. And Mazepin comes into this race and he hasn't spun. I think he maybe went off in practice once, and that was through turn 6 and 7. The sharp left-right hander going up the hill with the curbs on the inside, very easy to do. Lots of drivers have done it before. Lots of drivers have ended their races there. But he's finished the race and hasn't caused any issue. So the driver is improving, but it doesn't need to be Sky Sports. That's what I watch it on. every time that driver's mentioned he's going to cause a problem. He's a difficult driver to deal with. Okay, I'm getting bored of it now. It feels like a targeted attack, and it's not what I want to listen to.
It's got to the point where it's become a bit of a double standard, and like I say, we can't in one breath say that we want the Formula One world to be more encouraging, more compassionate, more positive, and then on the other hand, behave like that to one of the drivers, where we kind of, it's like they want him to do something so that it gives them another reason to have a go at him. Like they want him to do something negative. They want him to impede someone so and go, see, I told you so. He's a bad guy. It's dull. It's just not what we want to hear. Like you say, I don't want to hear that on broadcast. Let's just focus on what's actually going on, not what we wish were happening.
So many drivers over the last 5-10 years, like for example in Imola, George Russell and Bottas came together, and George clonked Bottas over the head, with his helmet on. No one's talking about how, George probably lost his cool and, lost his control and went over and said some horrible things to Bottas and hit him over the head despite the fact he has a helmet on, and walked away, puts an apology out, and all's forgiven. That's never spoken about ever again. Max and Sergio Perez was it Sergio Perez or Ocon in Parc Ferme one time? They had a bit of a shoving contest, but that's never spoken of again. But Mazepin just seems to is getting the brunt with all the commentators at the moment. And like I said, I don't care. Let's just move on. Let's focus on the racing. We've said
what we need to say.
Yeah, we'll try not to bring it up every single race week. But apart from that, I feel like qualifying was pretty straightforward. We had the normal 1, 2, 3. I'm surprised that Bottas, classic Bottas, tops FP1, 2, and 3, does really well in the first couple of sessions. Because he topped Q1 and he topped Q2, and then came into Q3, and Hamilton gets the 100 poles.
Yeah, that was about it for qualifying. Not too many major disappointments or upsets. We've said before that the Spanish Grand Prix tends to give a certain raw pace indicator just because of its use for testing. It's obviously a very easy one to simulate given the amount of laps that teams tend to do around this track in general. Now, they didn't test there this year, but nonetheless, teams still have a lot of data of kind of what to expect at this track. That's one thing that probably might have changed things ever so slightly in altering that corner, is that it might have just changed a little bit of the data, perhaps provide a small amount of unpredictability. But otherwise, the circuit is... a lot of people kind of know what to expect, and that tends to make the running order less of an upset. Yeah, more predictable.
Yeah.
Moving on to the race itself then. So I think the first talking point I want to come out with then is early on in the race with Yuki Tsunoda. He had an engine cutout. It just turned off. This was only lap 8, I think it was.
It's pretty early on.
He was approaching the end of the second DRS zone. He was coming into, turn 9, the actual change corner itself. They switched off. The whole car just turned off. Not a good sign for the Honda engineers, I'm sure. Just seeing the car should not just turn off in the middle of the race. But what was a problem for me here was not necessarily that, although frustrating, I'm sure it was for Tsunoda. We have a car sat half on the track. Cars are still racing. There's yellow flags going, but cars are still going for it. It took way too long for that safety car. I'm sat there going, "Where's the safety car? Call out the safety car." If someone has an accident here, wind blows or their tires get a bit cold as they're going through it's still early on in the race. That would be a horrific accident. Call out the safety car. We could have a car buried in the gravel 100 meters away and they'd call out the safety car. I don't understand why that took so long, and it was unacceptable, in my opinion. Unacceptable for it to take that long.
I completely agree. I was sat there, and just a reminder to everyone that we've seen cars go off on that very patch of runoff in both practice and qualifying. So we've had previous incidents throughout the whole weekend in that area, and now we're on the race. Now we're on the race day, and we've got a car which is broken down on the track. And the driver has ejected his steering wheel and is climbing out, and the only thing going is yellow flags. It's just a slow down caution. It took, like you said, way too long for the safety car to come out. I mean, we're talking plus 30 seconds, 45 seconds for a safety car to get deployed. Completely unacceptable for what I think is a slam dunk hold on, there's a car on the track here, broken down. He's not going anywhere. Safety car out right now. Hit that button. Yeah. Give him 2 or 3 seconds to see if it looks like, they can restart. No, he's ejected his steering wheel. He's not going anywhere. Let's get that safety car out. Took too long. I completely agree.
Yeah, you think in the list of things that they put together where this is the threshold of a safety car, somebody stopped on track would be right at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So
at the end of a heavy braking zone.
Exactly. Yeah. Just I don't understand that, and there needs to be some serious conversations about how that cannot happen again, basically, because it's the gap between them deciding to do that. Obviously, they have to then send out the signal to all the teams, and the teams have to signal the drivers, full course caution, etc., etc. It's in that gap where something really nasty could happen. That should not be possible. In modern Formula One, with all the technology they have, that should not be possible.
And we should be learning from this. Like, terrible things have happened in the past, and we should not be creating situations where they may happen again. Period. Yeah, very interesting point. But I completely agree. I actually put one of the very few tweets I put out during the race was, why did that take so long for that safety car to come out? Because that was ridiculous.
Yeah. Your first talking point then?
So my first talking point is actually the start of the race. And it's Max's move on Lewis and how great it was. And then how far those two drivers pulled ahead of everyone else. So race start, Lewis gets a good start. Max gets a slightly better start. Max gets into Lewis's slipstream for what seems like a split second and then goes side by side into turn one. No one really has the corner because it's quite wide into turn one, so they've both arguably got the race in line. I thought they touched. When I saw it from the helicopter cam, I thought Max had slightly touched Hamilton, and then I thought, oh no, Hamilton's gonna have damage for the whole race now. What a race ruiner. But it wasn't the case. When watching the onboard footage, Hamilton actually pulled out of the corner quite significantly, lost a bit of time, obviously lost all the momentum going into turn two. By doing so, ruined Bottas's kind of slipstream on Hamilton. So Bottas got really hindered in that whole turn 1, 2, and 3, which is why he dropped back to P4. But bold move. These two drivers, yet again, they've had a fantastic 3 races together, and I'm glad to see that. Fourth race, turn 1, they're at it, wheel to wheel, giving it absolutely everything. And then the second part, where did they go? Where did they go? Those two cars were in a different league. Now I'm talking about, Max and Lewis. They've got same machinery as Bottas and Perez. Bottas and Perez sat back down in the, lower ends of the, well, not the lower ends of the grid, in the top 10. But Max and Lewis, blimey, they were eking out a second and a half a lap before that safety car came out. I think it was about 8 seconds ahead by lap 8. They were clear of the third place position, which was Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. That's ridiculous. It blows my mind that we've got these two cars which are so close together, but yet can put out such a difference in compared to the rest of the field.
Yeah, I think we saw an emblematic display of just how good these two are, how hard they're fighting. It was elbows out again for Verstappen, very reminiscent of Imola, where he just pushed him right to the edge. Thought it was exactly where racing needs to be, right on the edge, a little bit of a barge, but not... It was impolite, but it was not as far to be like, you can't do that. That's not racing. Yeah. They didn't make contact. Again, the quality of the driver required to be in such a situation and not make contact shows just how good they are. And like you said, they were pulling away so far. They were just in their own little race, really. And that was true for the rest of the race as well. They were just in their own little competition. And it was a fantastic battle. And whilst we're here as well, you mentioned Bottas losing out somewhat on the slipstream and ended up losing third place. Leclerc, who also had a pretty good start, he managed to get past Bottas here on turn 3. I thought it was very reminiscent of Alonso in 2013, where he got past Hamilton by kind of managing to keep his foot in it going round turn 3 and held it round the outsides to get it onto the straight.
It was impressive.
Brilliant move, and great start from Leclerc, and Bottas losing out. It kind of shows that butterfly effect, doesn't it? You have Verstappen getting his elbow out, Hamilton loses out, so Bottas loses out, and then Leclerc gains. Yeah. And that's what it's all about.
If you're on the right side of the grid.
Yeah, you've got to be able to take those opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, it's 50-50. If you're following Lewis into turn 1, you're going to get held up, and if you had followed Max into turn 1, you would have got a brilliant slipstream and fantastic traction into turn 2. So all the cars behind him, you pick left or right, you're going to get held up one way or the other. Just happened to be that Bottas picked, I guess because Bottas started P3, he was already behind Lewis and tried to get the moved on into turn 2. But unfortunately, just didn't get the traction. And then that Ferrari literally flew around the outside of him. Looked like that Ferrari had way more overspeed, or just a brilliant entrance into that turn. It was incredible how fast they overtook. And then Bottas obviously struggled to get back at that Ferrari.
Well, now let's move on for my next talking point. I think we'll kind of more or less stick with this and go for what is the really big talking point, I think, for this race, which is the big Red Bull Mercedes battle, the strategy battle that emerged between these two, played out more or less just like Hungary 2019. I feel like Red Bull really should know better by now. They seem to be caught pretty short by Mercedes committing to the two-stopper. Hamilton also, as he was chasing Verstappen, got on the radio and said, I want a bit less front wing. Clearly, the car was a little bit too pointy. He wanted to be able to ensure he could get a little bit more speed, gain those advantages on the straight so that when he did get into DRS range, it was going to be decisive. He could just get the job done and he wasn't going to be stuck following, because we know that the Mercedes is not as great at following cars because it's designed to cut through clear air. And it does that very well, as we've seen so many times, with that car just disappearing off into the distance, especially with Hamilton at the wheel. Now, the strategy battle itself, Verstappen found himself, it was Hamilton that first seemed to be going long, because Verstappen blinked first. He was the one that first pitted. It seemed to be looking fairly comfortable until later on, where Mercedes committed to that double stop. And like I say, I think they caught Red Bull by surprise here. And I feel like Red Bull should have reacted to that earlier. I feel like they should have been in a position where they could have said, well, we could pit Verstappen now and lose out on the track position, but he might have the pace to take the race to Hamilton later on. And that would have given them more of a chance in the closing stages of the race. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. At the time, they were probably pretty desperate to hold on to track position just in case there's there could be a safety car, or there could be a chance that the tyre difference between the two was significant enough that Verstappen could take advantage of the pace. But it feels like Red Bull making the same mistakes as the past, as well as mistakes in the pit stop as well. And that affected the strategy battle too. So my overall take from this is that Mercedes played an absolute blinder with their strategy, and that Red Bull kind of repeating mistakes that they've made in the past.
Yeah, I was quite surprised when Max came in and had a shocking pit stop. I mean, for Red Bull, they had a shocking pit stop. It was over 4 seconds, so lost a net 2 seconds to Lewis Hamilton. And at that point, you would think Lewis would have the lead. If Lewis had boxed that lap, if Mercedes had reacted on that, Lewis would have had the lead. And I was quite surprised to see Mercedes not react to Red Bull's initial pit stop. If I'd seen Red Bull drive past my pit garage, have a little bit of a slow pit stop, knowing that actually that's probably the difference between coming out in P1 and coming out in P2, I would have brought Lewis in straight away and hopefully would have come back out in P1. So I was surprised to see that Lewis was going long, especially had a couple of radio calls from multiple drivers saying the tyres were struggling. Obviously, that Mercedes works well in clean air, so the tyres would have been at a better optimal temperature, been working a lot better, and clearly he had the pace to continue for an extra 7 or 8 laps. I think it was maybe 10 laps his tyres were fresher at one point, which was a good call by Mercedes. And then completely got me by surprise. It looked like Lewis had a real good exit into the back straight. He was like 0.8 of a second behind Max. Right, this is pretty close. He's going to get DRS. Will he make a move into turn 1? And then just peeled off into the pits. And I thought, blimey, that's bold. I thought Mercedes have. At one point, I was trying to do the maths in my head. I'm right, okay, 21-second pit stop, 2 seconds here, 1 second there. I was like, oh my goodness, it's going to be a second per lap he has to make back on not quite brand new medium tyres, but they were a scrub set. They'd only had a couple of laps on. But yeah, completely threw me. Very bold by Mercedes, but clearly they've got a lot of people working in the background to come up with such a strategy. And what can I say apart from how well it was executed? Like, this is Mercedes, classic Mercedes perfection. Brilliant pit stop, fantastic strategy, brilliant encouragement. The morale was fantastic. Lewis drove incredibly those last 25 laps. Like, he had 24 seconds to make up with 24 laps to go. So he knew what he had to do, whilst lapping a lot of cars, and obviously Max had to lap a lot of cars as well. But we're at Spain. It's pretty hard to overtake here. So he had a lot of work to do, and he managed to pull it off. What does surprise me is why Red Bull didn't jump on that like I thought Mercedes would do at the first pit stop. So they've seen Lewis come in. Right, okay, they're probably going in on their head. Right, he's going to have much fresher tyres than us. He's a fast driver. The car's going to be in clean air. He's probably done a catch-up. So at this point, Max had already been on the radio saying, we're going to struggle to make it to the end, or something along those lines. It was very informative. It wasn't a complaint. It was just, I don't think we'll make it to the end. It wasn't, the car's terrible. So he's he's giving back constructive criticism as well, which is, I think, is really good for Max. It's going to really shape his career and help with his driving. Just surprises me why Red Bull didn't go, right, let's box. We'll come out 2 seconds behind Lewis. Let's see what we can do on track. We've already passed him once. Let's see if we can get cast him on the pit straight. But no, they didn't. They went for the really long game, and the Mercedes played the double stop, so the 2 pit stops. So it was just amazing to see it all come together in the last 10 laps, because obviously Lewis made those positions back pretty quickly.
Yeah, what continues to be so impressive about Mercedes, like you say, with this masterclass strategy, is that even when their competitor or competitors, in the unlikely event that there happens to be more than one team able to compete with them, is that even when their competitors are faster and maybe get the edge on them on Saturday and even show strong race pace, that strategy-wise, Mercedes seem to be capable of turning things around by dictating the flow of the race, dictating the flow of the strategy, because they're just able to make calls that no one else seems to have the confidence to make. And when Hamilton did come in for that second stop, even though the deficit was that significant, and like you said, you sat there going, how many laps is that? How fast has he got to go? Because it's Lewis Hamilton, and it's no longer a surprise that he can do things like any other driver, you'd be like, blimey, that's a big call. But Lewis Hamilton, I was just sat there going, we're just waiting for Hamilton to pass Verstappen now. We're literally just waiting for it to happen. And that means Red Bull were waiting for it to happen as well. I mean, they're watching the same race and they've got all the data. I find it very hard to believe how they could be sitting there thinking Verstappen could do that. It just seems so obvious. And the fact that they didn't react and didn't try to go for we've probably got a better chance behind him, but with tyres that are much stronger near the end.
Yep.
And they I felt like they were just sitting there waiting for it to happen. I couldn't understand it.
They were sitting ducks at the end of the day. It was a matter of when, not how, because that overtake was always going to take place. Maybe Red Bull thought that because Max held Hamilton up so much at the first part of this race that he was able to do it again, maybe for the final 5 or 6 or 7 laps, but it just wasn't the case. Not with the difference in age of tyres, not with the difference in grip coming out of that last corner. It was such an easy pass. Max
Which
did
Verstappen
everything he
told
did.
them as well. He said to them, this, they have so much more grip here, and this is as they were going through that chicane.
Yeah.
I know Verstappen has a history of being a little bit complainy over the radio in some of these situations, but I feel like they should be listening to him now because
it was fully
he's not
justified.
messing about, is he?
Red Bull for that whole weekend have been really strong in Sector 3. It's a classic Red Bull. It's a tight couple of corners. Red Bull's got a fantastic chassis underneath them, so they're obviously going to be quite good. And then when you see the Mercedes move better through those corners than the Red Bull does, you think that there's no chance. There's no chance. If they're better in the corners and they've got the power on the straights.
And that's with the Mercedes with less wing as well.
Absolutely.
That was after they adjusted the wing.
I really enjoyed Hamilton on the radio saying, I think it was just more of a casual conversation, but it was, I don't think I'm going to have much tyres left at the end of this. And I can't remember who the race engineer was, but his response was, we think Max may have a little bit less than you.
Yeah, it was Bono trying to just give him that kind of calm encouragement. He'll have less.
It didn't seem, they'll have a little bit less. I thought that was quite funny. For me, it just felt like a casual conversation happening whilst Lewis is trying to close that gap. But again, just surprised me how quick he closed that gap. That was the real shocker.
And so the inevitable result was that lap 60, Hamilton did indeed take the lead. It was easy. It was just an easy draft past him. Verstappen did his best to try and do a little bit of a weave to avoid the slipstream, but it was nothing doing. It wasn't really even much of a fight. And then he did have the gap on Bottas to go back pit for softs and take the fastest lap, which to Verstappen's credit, he put in a real cracking lap in order to ensure that. But yeah, that was a pit stop that came way, way too late. He shouldn't have been pitting. He should have been pitting for the win, not for the fastest lap. And it didn't happen. Your next talking point then?
So whilst we're talking about Hamilton and Mercedes and Red Bull, I want to talk about team orders and different strategies within the team. So not necessarily team orders, but if your two cars are on different strategies and Hamilton's coming through on much newer tyres and Bottas has been asked to maybe not hold him up too much, maybe he should have moved out the way. So from what I remember, and I just want to get your views on this, Hamilton's a couple of seconds, probably 2 seconds away from Bottas on the pit straight, and then he's closing up quite rapidly. We're talking like a second a lap. So by sector 1, he's within half a second of Bottas, and Bottas just didn't move until did he move out the way, or did Hamilton have to commit to an actual on-track overtake against his teammate? What's your views on this whole situation? So Hamilton's obviously coming through fast. Bottas is struggling with tyre pace. He's already been asked to speed up and has been told that Hamilton's coming through for the race win, which may be a little bit demoralising for old Bottas there, because he's been told to speed up and that his teammate behind him is coming through to win the race. And at one point, he was 10 seconds ahead of Hamilton. So I can imagine Bottas was feeling a little bit demoralised, but didn't move out the way.
It was somewhere in the middle, it looked like to me. Like, yeah, he certainly didn't just move out of the way, but it wasn't quite a full-on overtake, but certainly he didn't make it as easy as he could have been. I can kind of see Bottas's point of view, even though clearly what he was told over the radio was true. You know, he was told Lewis is fighting for the win, even though this was, he was a few seconds back at this point. It's like, look, he's fighting for the win and you're not, so just get out of the way. You can understand why any racing driver hear that and be like, well, yeah, we'll see about that kind of thing. The overtake was inevitable. Bottas made it a little bit harder than it needed to. I thought it certainly made it a little bit more dramatic that he made it a bit of a half and half. It's hard to say whether or not he really did make him commit to a full-on overtake. But Bottas's annoyance there is understandable. But if you want to avoid that, Valtteri, you've got to go a hell of a lot faster.
It was certainly interesting to say the least, and it made it a little bit more spicy towards the end of the race. I thought, oh, blimey, Bottas is actually going to hold up Hamilton here. There was plenty of opportunities beforehand. He got that second DRS straight just before Hamilton got through, where it would have been really easy to let Hamilton come through, and then Bottas could have kept behind Hamilton and got the DRS onto the first DRS. But no, he kind of left it open into turn 10 or turn 9 or 10. I can't remember which one it is, but didn't leave it open. So it was a little bit more of a struggle. I'm not sure we'll ever know, but it was definitely signs of Bottas wanting to get his race over and done with. He wants his race to be a priority. So why should he be letting his teammate through? And don't get me wrong, I love it. I think it's fantastic, but I want to see Bottas fighting at the start. Like, Hamilton's just boxed twice, and he's then caught up 10 seconds to Bottas in the matter of 6 or 7 laps for the race win. It shouldn't be happening. I mean, I don't want to go into it too much because we'll just be rinsing and repeating what I said last week about Bottas and how he needs to step it up. But he does need to step it up because at the moment he's that second driver. He's that B-spec driver in that A-class Mercedes.
Talking of team orders, we had a team order going on at McLaren as well. Lap 50, Ricciardo had pitted for softs a few laps prior. He was coming up on Norris. Clearly, Ricciardo had the speed with the fresher tyres. But I thought it was a bit of an awkward swap over because obviously Ricciardo was going to be in a position to try and chase Ocon ahead.
At the time, yeah, Ocon.
Who was in P6. I think this was a fight for P6 at the time. And yeah, it was just a really awkward swap over. I really wish they'd done it in a better place because in doing so, Norris letting Ricciardo go by allowed Sainz to get very close for the end of the lap. And that led to Sainz being able to much easily overtake Norris a lap later. I feel like there must have been a better place to allow that swap to happen without him losing so much time because he slowed down in such a place where Sainz didn't need to. And it was right near the end of the lap. Obviously, he ended up getting DRS as a result. Slightly awkward changeover there between the two McLaren drivers. Obviously, they had to get it done quickly, but yeah, and Norris also facing that incoming Ferrari had got a black and white flag for weaving across the track to avoid the slipstream, which is fair enough, really, because it was a late Actually, it wasn't the weaving. It was Ricciardo that got told off for weaving. He did a bit of a late jink, didn't he? As Sainz was approaching him, he did a bit of a...
was it Sainz? Yeah.
Did a bit of a that. And
Very late.
Fair enough. Like, you shouldn't really be doing that at those kind of speeds.
What I found interesting with that, with the switch of the two McLaren drivers, is that Lando was within 0.4 of Ocon at the time they switched, and that's really close. They're going through sector 2, and he's 0.4. So actually, could have been a move going into turn 9 or 10, or could have been a move going down the back straight. But they decided to switch, like you said, in a really unconventional place, where actually once Ricciardo had got ahead and Norris had fallen back behind Ricciardo was 1.8 seconds behind Ocon. I thought, well, they've lost so much time there. It was just a really inconsiderate way to switch two drivers. There must, like you said, there must have been a better place to do so. And whilst we're talking about McLaren, it's good to see that their pit stops are getting a little bit more slick. They weren't in the 3+, 4+ seconds we've experienced this year so far. They're getting a little bit better.
We got 2.6 for Norris on lap 24. That's more like an actual pit stop as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So it's good to see that they're not chucking away seconds in the pit stops. I mean, a lot of drivers this week had problems in their pit stops with their tyres not coming out in time, or tyres not being inflated. I can't remember.
That was really weird, wasn't it? That was Giovinazzi. Yeah. Whilst we're here, we mentioned this. I've never seen that before. I've never seen a driver come into the pits and then have a tyre ready to go on that is completely deflated. The pit crew member bashed the tyre to demonstrate that it was just completely flat. And because they have to have a whole set, they can't just replace one tyre. They have to be all the same. They all got to run inside the garage, get another, put the tyres down, get another set of tyres, and Giovinazzi must have been stationary for about 25 seconds. It was awful.
Oh, it was so much longer than that. It was about 40. It was in the 40s. Originally, when I saw it happen, I thought they put the wrong set of tyres on the wrong car, because we've seen that happen before. Someone drive in, I think it was George last year in the Mercedes, they put Bottas's tyres on his car, so they had to pit to correct it. Otherwise, it would have been a monumental penalty and fine for the team. So it looked like that had happened, but actually watching the replay, like you said, that mechanic was just thumping this floppy tyre to demonstrate that it had a puncture.
Especially when it's shiny like that as well. It just looks wrong. Yeah. It looks perverse.
Something was, I've never seen that before, and I've watched hundreds of F1 races, and even the Sky Sports team were like, well, it's very unusual. That's not something we've seen before. And we've seen some strange stuff in the pit stops, like 3 soft tyres going on and 1 medium, or 3 mediums and 1 hard. Williams back in Spa a couple of years ago, but have a deflated tyre come out. How did they not notice it? I mean, it must have literally deflated seconds before, or within really 10 seconds of that pit stop, because you'd think if you'd pick it up, the structural integrity of the tyre would have been felt differently to what it should feel like.
Because usually they hit the ground with it, or maybe they roll it.
Yeah.
You think they'd notice. I don't know.
Because it was proper floppy. Like it was not holding its integrity at all. What a strange old pit stop that was.
Okay, whose turn is it? It's my turn.
Yeah, you go next.
Okay, so my next thing I want to talk about is, and I wish it were better news, but it's another underwhelming weekend for Aston Martin. Come away with no points again. Now, as we said earlier, Spain tends to show a slightly more raw-paced presentation, a lot of simulations, the track is well understood, people kind of know what to expect. If that's the case, then the signs are not great for Aston Martin. Now, we did see on lap 11, Stroll, a brilliant move on Alonso into turn 4, round the outside, got his elbows out, avoided contact. It was a really, really nice move from Stroll. That was the highlight of the race for Aston Martin. Vettel ended up in a pit stop battle with Alonso and lost out by being stationary for about 4 seconds, and ended up coming out behind Gasly as a result. He did end up getting past Gasly, but then was repassed by Gasly later on into the race. And they were just battling for the lower positions, the kind of sub P15 positions. And later on in the race, near the very end, I think about lap 61, 62, Stroll had a bit of a tangle with Alonso going into turn 2. He had to give the position back because he hadn't gone around the bollard that had been put in place.
The cones.
You don't go over the track properly. And so the end result for Aston Martin was Lance Stroll in P11 and Sebastian Vettel in P13. Both had been lapped. Neither car really looking on the pace other than Stroll's good move. Yeah, just very, very underwhelming. And the same was true of Saturday as well. Neither car getting into Q3. Stroll just narrowly missing out. But it's just still very, very underwhelming for Aston Martin. I had hoped for a slightly more encouraging position for Vettel, who was doing quite well at one point to battle his way up into the midfield, but it just never really translated into anything. And I kind of expected a driver of his experience to cope with the tyre situation a little bit better, but it didn't. It didn't seem to materialise.
Yeah, I think over the last couple of weeks, we've seen teams do really well at some tracks and then not do as well in other tracks. Like Alpine comes to mind. Some tracks has really suited them. So last week, it really suited them. This week wasn't horrendous by any means necessarily, but I say Bahrain, it wasn't brilliant for them. Aston Martin have just always been consistently outside that top 10. No matter what they do, they could put off a brilliant qualifying session and yet somehow they'll fall back 7 or 8 places and be at the back end of the grid. Like you said, Lance Stroll finished in P11 and Vettel in P13. It's just a really shocking, uninspiring week. And this is a team where last year they were finishing on the lead lap. So both these cars have been lapped this week like they were last week. So they were finishing on the lead lap last year, podiums, pole positions. I just don't understand what's happened. Like, this car's gone so far backwards. It's probably the worst car in terms of development, how well they've developed from 2020 to 2021. Obviously, I don't think you can put Haas into the equation because that's just they're at the back and they haven't really gone forward. But in terms of raw pace lost, Aston Martin have lost the most, without a doubt. And I honestly thought this year might have been the year where Lance Stroll outshines Sebastian Vettel and outscores him by 2 or 3 times the amount of points, and it's going to end Sebastian Vettel's career in a way where Seb might just retire and leave Formula One as a 4-time world champion, very successful driver, but he's clearly lost it. But the car just isn't giving him any opportunities to prove what he can do at all, which is a massive shame.
At the very least they could do is get their pit stops right. Vettel obviously must be thinking they're not doing him any favours by sitting him there for that long and making him lose out another position because of it. So, yeah, just wish it was better news for Aston Martin. But, we know that they've suffered because of the regulation change. We know that Mercedes have suffered for it, and obviously their car has developed on a very, very similar concept. They started off by basically copying the W11 and going from there. The development has moved away from the Mercedes, specific Mercedes design, but nonetheless, it is still a low rake car, and they are the ones most affected by the regulation change. They just don't seem to have adapted to it. So I can't see any signs of improvement thus far. We've had, when I think about the tracks that we've had so far, they've been, apart from Bahrain, I would say that Imola, Portimao, and Catalonia are fairly similar. So maybe we will see some changes as we get to some of the slightly different tracks. When we get to sort of real power tracks, maybe we'll see a change. I don't really know, but there isn't really any signs of them being able to capitalize on a particular advantage that means that they could find themselves fighting outside P15 and below, because that's basically where we've seen them.
And I don't think they really have an understanding of where it's gone wrong either. Obviously, they can turn around and say the regulations haven't helped us, and they've really disadvantaged our car, which is, it's a fair assumption because Mercedes were facing the same issues in pre-season testing and arguably in Bahrain at race 1. But Mercedes got on top of their issues, whereas Aston Martin just haven't. They've just, there's just no sign of that car getting better. They've brought upgrades to both their cars this week, or Lance Stroll had those upgrades last week, and yet the cars just haven't noticed any difference whatsoever. So it's a real shame that a car which I thought was going to be really competitive this year, like you said in the season preview when we were talking about the launches, that you thought they were going to be a real threat to the McLaren. Luckily for McLaren they're not, but it's a shame that they're not racing for any points at the moment, and hopefully they can do.
If I can roll this into another team that is suffering,
go ahead.
It doesn't seem to be doing as well as I thought, and that's AlphaTauri, who I thought they were going to be really dangerous this year. And I saw what they were doing last year. and the fact that the car had real potential, and Pierre Gasly is a brilliant driver, and Yuki Tsunoda had a load of potential and had shown real kind of spirit for a rookie. We did mention quite near, maybe might have even been for Bahrain, that Yuki Tsunoda just maybe needs to chill out just a little bit. He was letting his emotions get the better of him, and I think that is now shown to be really the case, because he was just pushing a little bit too hard too soon in qualifying. Again, maybe let his emotions get the better of him, and ended up starting P16 for all his efforts. Even though he was leading the pack and getting the clean air to get you'd think he might have held off a little bit with his tyres or something, and that didn't work out. He was unlucky with the engine. Obviously, that's not his fault that the engine cut out. But as for Gasly, he started off totally on the wrong foot by... Did you see where he started? He kind of came into the pit box after the formation lap.
Yeah.
You gotta actually stop at the line, mate. You don't get to start where you like. You'd think someone of Gasly's experience would know that.
I just want to touch on that.
Strange mistake.
Before you talk about AlphaTauri anymore, just talk about Gasly and his pit box. Well, it was under investigation for what felt like 20 laps. There was a clear video footage and pictures that he'd gone too far. He'd gone like half a foot over his pit box in clear violation of where he needs to start.
No discussion needs to be had about that.
No, it's as clear cut as the safety car. If the car's stuck on the track, a safety car needs to come out. If a car starts a foot closer to the start line than it should do, probably should be getting penalised. There doesn't need to be an investigation for 20 laps. But carry on with your AlphaTauri and the dismay.
Well, yeah, just, I was going to say similarly to that, very, very strange mistake. You really need to be not making very rookie errors like that. Gasly was starting P12. Not a great qualifying session for him. We know that he can probably do much better, but he was in a position to definitely grab some points. Points were absolutely on the table, and he kicks it all off with a 5-second time penalty, which he had to serve in his first stop, came out dead last. He also had a slow stop when he went on the softs at about lap 49 and ended up coming out P16. To be fair to him, he did very well to end up grabbing 1 point by the end. He was able to take advantage of a few cars that were struggling near the end. So that was something. So he managed to grab at least 1 point out of it. But I really expected to see the AlphaTauri fighting hard and, looking like a bit of a strong underdog. And that's just not really happened. And in places, it's not really been their fault, like with Tsunoda this weekend, but also they're just not quite capitalised. And things like in Bahrain, where Gasly lost his front wing by touching Ricciardo, I think it was. You've got a car under you that looks like it's capable of fighting in the top 10, and there's these tiny little errors creeping in. It's just a real shame, because I really wanted to see AlphaTauri be competitive this year, and it's not happened so far.
But there's a few of those errors keep on cropping up. Like you said, it's all well and good having mistakes, which you can't help, like the engine cutting out. But there's been a lot of errors, a lot of driver errors, which haven't helped their situation whatsoever. But yeah, I was only speaking to my other half during the race, and we've both got Pierre Gasly in our fantasy F1 team, because last year he was so good. That car was good. Wasn't excellent by any means, but it was a good car, and he was a brilliant driver. And he scored so many points.
He seemed to be outperforming it every week.
Yeah. And this year, it just seems to be he's not outperforming that car. It's he's kind of just driving it, which I know that's the aim of the game, but he's just not really exceeding like I thought he would do.
Yeah, he's only scored 8 points so far, 4 races.
Yes, that's not good. Talking about points, I'm just going to have a little segue here. It's not one of my talking points, but George Russell was very close this week. I thought Williams did a fantastic job. Safety car came out and Williams double stacked, which I thought was a bold move, but they had nothing to lose and they managed to catch the pack back up almost straight away. So I thought, you know what? Fantastic move. Really surprised that Haas didn't do the same thing, because we've seen Haas do strange strategies before to try and capitalize to get some points. So I was surprised to see that they didn't do that. But at one point, George Russell was running in 7th because he'd obviously had that second pit stop quite early on and then required a third one. And up until 10 laps before the end, he was running in P9 and then dropped down to P10. And then unfortunately, Lando got him and knocked him out to P11. And then we had that 4 or 5 cars in the midfield fighting for that last 10th, for that last point, which Gasly got. but they all swamped him on the last couple of laps, which was a shame because he was very close to getting a point. And I can't tell if that Williams is getting better or worse in a sense that actually in qualifying, I'm doing a little bit of a reverse here. George obviously out-qualified Latifi, but Schumacher out-qualified Latifi as well. So I was thinking, maybe the Haas has actually had a little bit of improvement because, rookie driver coming in out-qualified someone who's been in the sport for a couple of years. Does happen from time to time, but this is
to our knowledge, that Haas is not being developed, is it?
No,
that
exactly.
car is not being developed. Don't know if the Williams is either.
So by rights, that Williams, the Williams should be ahead of that Haas car due to experience, and you would like to think it was a little bit faster this year.
They did do some developments.
Yeah.
At the very least.
But it looked like Russell was having a good time. He was throwing around some overtakes. He was moving up through the grid, and he just needed that race to be 10 laps shorter, and he would have scored his first points for Williams. But it just wasn't to be the case, which is a shame.
Yeah, he was about half a second, maybe even a little bit less on Alonso at one point. And I think when it came to that pack of cars that were on softer tyres, they just swamped him, and he ended up P15 or P60, P14.
P14, yeah. I think next week would be quite encouraging if Russell can hook it together in qualifying.
Yeah,
that's if anything, that's going to be their best opportunity to score a handful of points, or just a point. I don't want to be greedy, but if it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to be a track where you cannot overtake anyone.
Yeah, that's the time to take advantage of his Saturday skills. And
yes, Mr. Saturday
metaphorically strap on some Bodicea style sort of things on the wheels. Nobody can get past.
Yeah,
make your car as wide as possible. Yeah. So hopefully we will see if that can come to fruition next week.
Right, I've got one more.
Yeah, if you want to. Me too. So you go first.
Okay, so mine is it's about the Amazon, and it's about the displays or what we see on the screen. Now, I'm not a massive fan of anything new which comes up. So we've had the Amazon overtake predictions and how hard it's going to be for Max to overtake Lewis or vice versa. And then that classic, this is how much tyre life they've got left. We've got no data on this.
Performance. So I still don't know what it is we're looking at. I still don't know what it's supposed to say.
It looks like something straight out of the F1 2020 video game. But it gives me no encouragement in that fact that diagram is anything to go by. Like, it doesn't aid the racing, it doesn't aid the experience whatsoever. Just let them race. But something I was a fan of, which is new this week, is the team radio to the FIA.
Oh yeah.
Now I don't want to talk about why Toto was on the radio to the FIA, obviously complaining about Mazepin and not allowing I imagine Lewis or Bottas come through on blue flags, but we've never heard that before. And I thought, I'd tell you what, this could be interesting going forward, because team principals, especially when it's as tight as it is, like Toto Wolff and Christian Horner, they're not shy of belling up the old FIA, saying that one driver's done this and the other driver's done that, and they should be penalties or, demotions or what have you. But now we're privileged to, we've been privileged to the Mercedes radio call. I wonder if we'll be privileged to any more, because that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it would be nice to see more of that, wouldn't it? To hear a little bit more of that behind the scenes. Toto Wolff complaining, I think it was Mazepin, wanted blue flag or whatever. I don't think that's necessarily because it was Mazepin. I mean, they complain about everyone who gets blue flags. It's always,
exactly.
They get within 3 seconds of somebody who they're going to lap, and it's blue flags.
People should watch Sebastian Vettel back in the day.
Oh yeah, there's a pretty good video on YouTube where someone's done the old sort of tuning his voice to a song, blue flag, blue flag. So it's there we go. I ended up singing instead. I should have got you to do it.
There we go.
You can do your Bohemian Rhapsody a bit later on.
Absolutely not. Carry on.
But so it will be nice to see a little bit more of to hear a little bit more of the behind the scenes, people going straight to Michael Massey complaining about things. I don't know if I just want to hear complaints, but it's interesting to hear a little bit more of that behind the scenes. The little graphic came up on screen, and I was like, "What's that? I've not seen that before."
Yeah, same.
FIA.
Yeah.
What a juicy. What's going on here?
I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was the FIA contacting Toto for an infringement or something which one of their drivers had done. I thought, blimey, does it work both ways? I don't know. But yeah, definitely interesting. And like I said, I don't want a whole race of complaints to come through the radio, but that took me by surprise. I was quite happy to see something new and something new which I like.
Yeah. Yeah, more of that. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Less
So your final
pointless tire graphics that don't. It's not even clear what they're supposed to be saying. It's,
one.
what is it? That's the thing about the AWS stuff, is that it's just not even clear. It's so vague.
It's just sponsorship,
so
isn't it?
It's just so vague and almost like gamey that it doesn't really. You're like, what are we looking at? Or what is this telling me? So less AWS rubbish, more juicy behind the scenes FIA, Michael Massey, team principal. Yeah, radio chats.
Let's do it.
My last one then is just a quick one. Try and end on a slightly more positive note, which is that Daniel Ricciardo had a much more encouraging weekend. A little bit of concern creeping in that he was really struggling getting used to that car. That is a common trend amongst a lot of the drivers switching teams or maybe arriving in Formula One. One of our particularly special young drivers, I think he's called Fernando Alonso. And a lot of people sort of struggling with their new cars, and Daniel Ricciardo was one of them. He had to get used to this car. He had a similar thing when he was at Renault. He just had a little bit of an acclimatization period. But this weekend, Daniel Ricciardo looked a lot more confident. He had a much better qualifying session, started P7, out-qualified his teammate Lando, who has been particularly good in qualifying. So that was good for Daniel. And he ended up having a good fight. He was pretty rapid when he got into those softs. I can't help but be a tiny bit disappointed that he didn't manage to hold off Sergio Perez in the end, who was on something of a recovery drive. But he did end up P6. He gained one net position overall. He didn't get lapped. He held off Sainz. It was much more of what I expected to see from Daniel Ricciardo, and I hope that he just gets better going forward, because we know how good that guy can be. We know how rapid he is capable of being. We also know that the McLaren has had a really strong development. It's absolutely a contender. We've seen Lando Norris get on the podium on merit, not because of any kind of safety car, happenstance. I really, really want to see Daniel Ricciardo fighting for podiums in that car, and I think it could happen this season. All signs point to positivity in that regard. So I just wanted to say that it was a much more positive weekend for Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm not going to repeat everything you've just said, but it is good to see him a little bit more comfortable in the car. It was a little bit heart-wrenching when Perez did that massively late move on Ricciardo into turn one, because in my eyes it should be the other way around. Obviously, we all know how good Ricciardo is when it comes to last of the late breakers, and seeing Perez do it to him in that Red Bull was a little bit soul-destroying. But give it a couple more race weeks, and I think Ricciardo will really start to shine in the new McLaren.
And this is a track that he will know well as well. So it was encouraging that at this track, he was able to put it together, because somewhere like Imola or Portimao is probably relatively new in these cars for most of these drivers. So yeah, I did go into it thinking it's Barcelona. Hopefully Daniel Ricciardo will know this track. And sure enough, he was a lot more on the money.
We could see him do quite well next week as well at Monaco, obviously one of his favourite tracks. He's done very well there before in qualifying and in races. He's had good luck there, and he's also had bad luck, but he says it's one of his favourite tracks. And it's not all about the power in Monaco. The field is so much more closer. So I think qualifying in Monaco is usually the highlight of the weekend. I hate to say, but yeah, it could be interesting, and hopefully we get a juicy race in the pit stops, because it won't be on track, unfortunately. But we'll leave that to the Monaco Grand Prix. But yeah, hopefully some positive things to come from Daniel Ricciardo.
That brings us to the view from the stands, which is our community segment of the podcast. Now, we normally read out your comments and questions, but today I want to start off by thanking the F1 YouTube community channel. They're on Twitter as well. They're literally just called F1 YouTube Community, I believe. Do check them out, because they are doing the Lord's work. They are going around supporting every single channel of every size and promoting them to people, making sure everyone knows all the great content that is out there for F1 fans. They gave us a shout out in their compilation of channels between 500 and 1,000 subs that you should be following. So thanks very much to them for that. Do check out that video. We were flanked by a lot of other really good content creators, and help us get us into the 1,000 to 5,000 subscribers video next time by subscribing to the channel, if you would. But yeah, just wanted to thank the F1 YouTube community channel for giving us a little shout out. Much appreciated. Now that brings us to the first question that we got. Shane.
Okay, so this one's from Jim Kimberly. And the question is, when are you inviting me on your podcast? Straight to the point, cutthroat questions, which we love. I mean, Alex and I talked about this before the podcast, and yes, we would love to have. We want guests to come on the podcast. We want to talk about Formula One in all its glory and maybe specific topics. So we were thinking, when we do like an RPM roundup around maybe halfway in the season or about a specific topic, we'll get you guys on. Especially you, Jim, and we'll talk about this topic and we'll get your views on it and we'll talk about our views. It'd be really good to invite you guys on and we'll just have a general, just a chilled conversation about what's happening in Formula One.
Yeah, it'd be nice to decide on a specific topic to talk about.
Yeah.
Just to add on to this as well, Jim here, at Jim on F1, hosts his own channel called the F1 Week That Was. It's kind of a satire. Like a sort of news satire of Formula One, a little bit more sort of comedy rather than straight up news. But I rather enjoyed it. Anybody who's seen the day-to-day sort of Chris Morris style satire, it really reminded me of that. The Mazepin bashing is boring, less of that. But there is some really funny stuff on there. It is a good channel. I do recommend checking it out. The F1 Week That Was, it's called. It's some funny stuff on there. So yeah, Jim, we'd love to have you on the show. We'll just have to decide on a specific topic to talk about, and we'd love to get you and any other guests on, maybe in our next RPM roundup. So the answer is we'll be in touch. Provisionally, yes, and we'll be in touch as to when. Next question then from RPM legend Dave Doherty. Thanks for getting in touch with us. Your thoughts on Mercedes' strategy pit stops and when they use Bottas to chase Max in P2. We kind of touched a little bit on the strategy. Shane, anything to add to this?
No, apart from it was a classic Mercedes strategy, as in it was bold. It played off 100% like they expected. Very little room for error, and they just executed it fantastically.
Yeah, it really was vintage Mercedes strategy. And they did try and get Bottas to pile on a bit of pressure, but as we've said, he was mainly just being told to speed up and that your teammate's fighting for the win and you're not, mate. So a little bit demoralising, and we all saw what happened there. But thanks for getting in touch, Dave.
So the final one is from Fergie TV, so at Daniel Fergie 25, and he said, I knew it was going to be a predictable race. With that being said, I think Shane's singing would have been more entertaining than the race itself. Roll on the floor laughing. I had to go back through my Twitter feed and find out what was going on because I missed this tweet when it came in, but Alex, you did a brilliant job in responding to it. And with regards to Spain, we said this last week. Yeah, it's a little bit more of the predictable race, and we did have a little bit more of a predictable race. However, it was still exciting. Let's not knock it off straight away. We had a brilliant fight for P1 all the way down to the last couple of laps. The fight in the midfield was fantastic, and I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't amazing. It wasn't one of the best races we've had this year, but equally, I don't think it will go down as one of the worst races this year because it was still very interesting. As for me,
we haven't had Abu Dhabi yet.
We haven't had Abu Dhabi, the final race where it's just going to be a procession. Blimey.
Unless it's a fight for the championship.
And then we can hope it's heading in that direction. Max just needs to get a win next week, and then we'll start equaling each other out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not all over yet. 4 races in, the championship fight is still on, which is it's more than what we could say for previous years in the sport. But I can rest assured that my singing would have been no more entertaining than the Spanish Grand Prix itself.
Well, there's only one way to find out, Shane. 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely not. Maybe a 1 million subscriber special. There we go.
Oh, well, I'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Oh, dear. But thanks very much for getting in contact. Alex, any thoughts on the predictability of the race, or do you think we've covered it?
I think we knew that it was not going to be super, super thrilling, but I still think we saw a good race. We still saw a continuing of that big battle, and I don't think it was ever going to be a huge thriller, and I don't think we're probably going to see a huge thriller next week either. But
stick with it.
It was still a fun race. I still enjoyed it. I didn't find myself zoning out or anything, which sometimes I do on the more dull races. But thanks for getting in touch, Bergie TV. Thanks, Daniel. And do send in your comments and questions to us at RacePerMinute on Twitter, or info@raceperminute.com, or our contact page at raceperminute.com. So thanks very much for everyone getting in touch.
Moving on, it's a time of the week which I absolutely dread because I always forget to pick one. It's Driver of the Day and Championship standings. Now, the official Driver of the Day was announced this week on TV instead of on Twitter. And it was Lewis Hamilton for what I can only assume was the first time in a very long time, because we mention every week how much it takes to get Lewis Hamilton the Driver of the Day because he has to have a flaw this weekend. And then, I don't know, even when he does have a flaw this weekend, it always seems to be a Max or Perez for spending 50 laps on a set of tyres. But Lewis Hamilton actually got Driver of the Day this weekend, which I think is very well suited because it was a difficult race and he executed it very well. But Alex, I'm going to hand over the mic to you. Who is your Driver of the Day for the Spanish Grand Prix?
I'm going to go with the popular vote. I think I got to give it to Lewis Hamilton. He was outstanding. And when he came out on that set, and I realized in that moment that it was this incredible deficit to have to overcome at that stage in the race with that amount of pressure, with Max Verstappen of all drivers to have to catch. And in my mind, I went, he'll definitely do this. And I was like, this is ridiculous that I would even have that thought. And of course he did it. Of course he did, including having to negotiate a slightly awkward, not quite letting him by his teammate. But Hamilton just knows, and after he'd gone long in his original stint as well, Hamilton knows exactly what to do with the rubber that is under him, and he managed to convert that 100th pole into the win. It was an emblematic Lewis Hamilton GOAT, king, whatever you want to call him. It was absolutely emblematic of his quality. And whilst there were some okay performances, I think Gasly did very well to end up snatching that point at the end. Perez had a nice little recovery drive. Ricciardo was stronger this weekend. In terms of Driver of the Day, I go with a popular vote. It has to be Hamilton.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I agree. I thought long and hard about this, and I looked at all the positions gained and lost, and who had a good recovery drive, and who had a good drive in general. But Lewis Hamilton, he started on pole position and he finished first. But to get to that, he was overtaken by Max Verstappen into turn one. Max looked like he had the pace. Lewis was struggling to overtake him for the whole first part of that race. Pulled out this audacious strategy and then managed to close a 24-second deficit with 6 laps to go. With 26 laps to go. And by 6 laps to go, he had taken the lead for P1 and then just drove to the finish line. It was absolutely incredible. Just goes to show that's the difference between, we're talking about the greats and the legends here. That was Lewis Hamilton at his finest. Calm, cool, and collective, knew exactly what was happening. And like you said, had to overtake teammate of the week, Valtteri Bottas, and just make it work. Like, the guy's a 7-time world champion. There's nothing else to say about the matter apart from that was one of his most brilliant drives in recent times.
Definitely, yeah. And that means bringing us onto the standings that Lewis Hamilton now leads the driver standings with 94 points, 14 points clear of Max Verstappen on 80. It would have been 15, but for the fastest lap that Verstappen managed to nab at the end. Bottas now slips into third, gets past Norris, just 6 points between the two of those now, with Norris on 41. Leclerc very close behind on 40. Perez still sixth with 32. Now, one of the predictions that I made was that Perez and Verstappen would beat Bottas in the standings. Perez still got quite a bit to show in terms of results. I think Red Bull, today of all days, would have been a day for Perez to be the ultimate wingman, make sure that strategy wasn't available to Mercedes, and he just wasn't quite there. He made that error in qualifying. It really held him back. He's currently 6th. Ricciardo in 7th with 24. Sainz with 20, Ocon on 10, Gasly only 8. I really expected him to have scored more by now. I think Ocon in particular has done very well to score the points that he has. Alpine slowly becoming contenders, which is good. Alonso also on 5, sharing the same with Stroll. Tsunoda on 2, which leaves Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Vettel, Russell, Schumacher, Latifi and Mazepin all yet to score. Vettel having not scored so far is not a good sign either. Not all his fault, not. But Aston Martin of all the teams really need to get some more points on the board.
So moving on to the 2021 Constructors standings, we've got Mercedes in the lead with 141 points. Red Bull have crossed the 100 mark and now have 112, so clearly in second place, with McLaren Mercedes in third place with 65 points, only 5 points ahead of Ferrari.
hotting up.
I think we're going to see a big battle this year between McLaren and Ferrari. Both those teams have taken a major step forward over the last couple of years. McLaren, very competitive. Ferrari have really turned things around in the last year. They've gone from being pretty terrible last year to now consistently finishing both drivers in the top 10. And we know how important it is to get both those drivers consistently in the top 10 because that's where the Constructors' Championship points come into play. We've got Alpine, who have had a bit of an up and down season so far. Some races they've been good, some races they haven't, but sat with 15 points with AlphaTauri Honda struggling back with 10, Aston Martin Mercedes with 5, and then we've got Alfa Romeo, Williams Mercedes, and Haas with 0 points each.
Yeah, still lots of races to go and lots to play for, but a couple of teams not quite scoring where they should. And yeah, McLaren v Ferrari, it is back.
It's on.
It is absolutely on, yeah. All right, that's it. Thanks very much for joining us for our post-race discussion of the Spanish Grand Prix. I think that despite expectations of a snoozer, I still think we got a good battle. We definitely saw some fantastic driving all over. And we hopefully covered everything there. Do send us your thoughts or questions if there's anything you think that we missed or anything else you'd like us to discuss in our next episode. You can always get in touch at RacePerMinute on Twitter. Do be sure to follow us on there for more. You can get in touch on our website, raceperminute.com, or our email address, info@raceperminute.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can also comment below and we'll respond to everyone who gets in touch. If you enjoyed the episode, give us a rating or a like wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Again, either on YouTube or your podcast app. Really helps us out, really gets us noticed by the algorithm. Notice me, algorithm senpai, so that we can be shared with lots of other people. And if you like what we do, you can obviously subscribe to us on YouTube as well and subscribe on your podcast app. And if you really, really like what we do and you want to help keep us going with the quality content, it's not cheap to do what we do because we want to keep the quality high and we want to make sure that we're doing Formula One justice. Then you can go to patreon.com/raceperminute, where for as little as £1 a month, you can have your name featured on our website. You can get your name in before every single video. We've got merchandise. Join us on Discord, watch the race with us, watch qualifying with us. There's lots to be gained. It really helps out the show. Patreon.com/raceperminute. Please consider supporting the channel if you really like what we do. That just leaves me to say on to Monaco then. Another race where most people would probably expect to not be massively thrilled by Sunday's action, but we do have Saturday to look forward to where it will absolutely be all to play for. What do you think we're going to see in Monaco, Shane? Any predictions?
I think we're going to see a couple of cars in the wall. I think we're going to see some rookies struggle, and it's not because they're rookies, but because it's Monaco. And most of them have driven there before, but these cars are a lot faster, a lot wider. We've already seen a couple of front wings come off. So I fully expect practice and qualifying to be full of yellow flags and red flags, but everyone to be safe. And I think maybe a red flag in qualifying could potentially mix up the order. We've seen it before. So that's who knows? We'll find out in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, here's hoping for drama in Monte Carlo. But thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.